17 years old, a future filled with promise. But in the safety of her own home, Ellie Gould's life was stolen, not by a stranger, but by someone she once trusted, a girl with a love for horses, a passion for learning, and dreams of joining the mounted police. Ellie Gould's future was only just beginning, until it was violently cut short in the quiet town of Calne, Wiltshire. Her life wasn't stolen by a faceless stranger, but by someone she trusted, a boy who couldn't accept rejection and who chose to end her life in the very place she should have been safe, her own home. This is not just the story of a murder, it's the story of a young life ended too soon, of obsession turned deadly. On this episode of The Deadly Diaries, we uncover the haunting case of Ellie Gould and ask how love, in its darkest form, can become lethal. Welcome to The Deadly Diaries, where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime. Eleanor Ellie Gould was born on February 6, 2002, the beloved daughter of Matthew and Carol Gould. She grew up in the quiet town of Calne, Wiltshire, where she lived with her family. At 17, Ellie was in Year 12 at Hardenhuish School in Chippenham, preparing for her A-levels. She was bright, hard-working and determined, with ambitions of studying psychology at university and a dream of one day joining the mounted police. Outside the classroom, Ellie's true passion was horses. She was a keen rider, competing in local equestrian and cross-country events, spending hours in the saddle doing what she loved most. Ellie also had a boyfriend, Tom, whose name proudly appeared on her Instagram page, accompanied by a pink heart. Tom was Thomas Griffiths, a 17-year-old classmate at Hardenhuish School. On paper, he seemed every bit the model student, a school prefect, an international-level swimmer, a county rugby player. Like Ellie, he came from a stable and loving family, and to those around him, he appeared to be a popular, normal teenager. But behind the image of a perfect student and devoted boyfriend, a darker truth was waiting. In January 2019, Ellie and Griffiths had begun dating. He was her first boyfriend. Yet as Ellie's A-levels approached, she began to feel suffocated by his constant attention. Wanting to focus on her studies, she decided to end the relationship in early May. The night before her death, Ellie confided in friends that Griffiths had not taken the breakup well. On the surface, there was no indication of what was to come next, but within 24 hours, her decision to walk away would have devastating consequences. A day after Ellie ended their relationship, Friday, May 3, 2019, Thomas Griffiths set a plan in motion. That morning, he left home with his mother in Derry Hill, as if nothing was unusual, heading off for school as normal. But Griffiths had no intention of sitting in lessons that day. After emailing his teachers to claim he was feeling unwell, he slipped away to Chippenham bus station. CCTV captured him boarding a bus, travelling straight back to his empty home in Derry Hill. But when he got back, Griffiths faced a new problem. His mother had also returned. To avoid being caught, he hid inside his bedroom wardrobe, waiting in silence until she left again. Once the house was finally empty, Griffiths emerged. He took the keys to a silver Ford Focus, climbed behind the wheel, and drove the 2.5 miles to Ellie's home on Springfield Drive in Calne, where she was alone, revising for her exams. It was a decision that would change everything for Ellie, for her family, and for the community that loved her. When Griffiths arrived at Springfield Drive, Ellie was home alone. She had stayed back from school that morning to focus on her revision, unaware of the danger about to step through her door. Police only have his word for what happened next. Griffiths later claimed that he and Ellie sat together at the kitchen table, studying, when an argument broke out. He has never explained the reason, only that their conversation became heated. In the space of moments, that tension turned to violence. Griffiths attempted to strangle Ellie, and when that failed, he armed himself with a knife taken from the family kitchen. In a brutal frenzy, he stabbed her in the neck 13 times. Griffiths spent more than an hour attempting to erase all traces of his actions. Using clothes to wipe down the kitchen and the crime scene, he placed them into a plastic bag. He washed his trainers in the kitchen sink and cleaned the knife using an apron before placing it in Ellie's hand to make her injuries appear self-inflicted. He then used Ellie's finger to unlock her mobile phone and, posing as her, sent a message to one of her friends who was due to give her a lift to school, telling the friend not to collect her. After returning home to change, he put his bloodied clothes in the washing machine, then discarded the bag of items in a nearby woodland. A neighbor later saw him returning from the woods. Concerned about how anxious the teenager appeared, the neighbor drove him back to school, where he was collected by his mother. Later that day, Griffiths sent text messages to friends claiming that he and Ellie were going on a break and see how things go after exams, and to Ellie's phone asking if they could meet. Griffiths had scratches on his neck, inflicted by Ellie as she fought for her life. Before his school friends could ask awkward questions, he posted an explanation on Snapchat, claiming the scratches on his face were self-inflicted because he was under pressure. Every step of his plan was calculated, cold, and designed to give the illusion that life was continuing as normal, while the devastating truth lay hidden inside the Gould family home. While Griffiths was lying to his classmates, sending messages and crafting a facade of normalcy, Ellie's father returned home in Calne. What he found inside his own kitchen would shatter his world forever. Gould's body was discovered at 3 p.m. that afternoon. Matthew later described what he came home to as the most frightening, horrific, and saddest scene I have ever witnessed. A scene, he says, that hijacks his thoughts and has haunted him ever since. In those first moments, confusion, shock, and grief collided. Matthew called for help, and the emergency services rushed to the house. But for Ellie, it was already too late. He added, "Her brutal end plays on my mind constantly." The safe, loving home he had known had become the scene of an unimaginable tragedy, and, in that instant, the devastating reality of Ellie's death became heartbreakingly clear. As news of Ellie's death spread, suspicion quickly turned toward the boy she had trusted most. By 6 p.m. on 3 May, just hours after Matthew Gould made the devastating discovery, Wiltshire police arrested Thomas Griffiths outside a friend's house in Calne. He was taken to Melksham police station to be held for questioning. Detectives began piecing together the truth. Evidence was drawn from Griffiths's mobile phone, CCTV footage tracking his movements, and a neighbor's account of seeing someone matching his description outside Ellie's house. He bore visible marks on his neck, injuries that were consistent with Ellie's desperate fight for her life. Still, Griffiths denied everything. He claimed he hadn't seen Ellie that day, insisting that their only plan had been to study together. But the lies quickly unraveled. Forensic testing revealed Ellie's blood on his trainers. With mounting evidence closing in, Griffiths was charged with her murder on 6 May. He first appeared before Salisbury Magistrates' Court, then Bristol Crown Court, where a trial date was set for October. But as the summer passed, Griffiths' resolve crumbled. On August 29, 2019, he pleaded guilty to the murder of Ellie Gould. The judge lifted reporting restrictions that had protected his identity, declaring the crime extremely grave. For the first time, the public would know the name of the boy who had taken Ellie's life. Griffiths' sentencing hearing took place on November 8, 2019. During the hearing, the judge described the chilling aftermath of Griffiths' attack, noting that he had left Ellie on the floor with the knife embedded in her throat and her left hand wrapped around the handle. The judge said he had no doubt that Griffiths had arranged the scene to make it appear that Ellie had been killed by her own hand or in some terrible accident. He reflected on the unimaginable impact on Ellie's father, Matthew Gould, who had initially believed the wounds were self-inflicted. The judge said there could be no more dreadful scene for any parent to contemplate than that which confronted Matthew when he came home that day from work. During the hearing, it was noted that Griffiths claimed not to remember the events of that day. He also tried to explain the marks on his neck as self-inflicted, but the prosecution argued they were far more likely to have been caused by his young victim fighting desperately for her life. Addressing Griffiths, the judge explained that his actions had not only snuffed out the life of a bright, intelligent, talented, and vivacious young woman with her whole life ahead of her, but had also wreaked misery and heartbreak on her family and friends. In her victim statement, Ellie's mother, Carol, described how the family had trusted Griffiths, welcomed him into their home, and even celebrated Ellie's 17th birthday with him. He had been treated as part of the family, a presence they believed was safe and well-intentioned. Carol recalled the unimaginable moment of holding Ellie's cold hand after her murder, describing it as something no parent should ever have to experience. She said that when suspicion first fell on Griffiths, her immediate reaction was disbelief. He could never have hurt Ellie, she thought, because he had always doted on her. It was a cruel betrayal that turned trust into tragedy. leaving a family to grapple with grief, shock, and the incomprehensible actions of someone they had once welcomed into their home. During the sentencing hearing, a letter written by Griffiths to the court was read aloud. In it, he expressed what he described as heartfelt remorse for his actions, stating that he was deeply sorry and that his apologies and explanations would never be enough. He added that he hoped, in time, he could show how truly sorry he was. Griffiths also claimed that his mental health had not been good at the time of the murder, offering it as a context for his horrific actions. Yet for the family and the community, his words could not undo the devastating loss or the betrayal of trust that had led to Ellie's death. Thomas Griffiths was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 12.5 years before he could be considered for parole. Due to his age at the time of the murder, the law prevented him from receiving a whole life tariff. Ellie Gould described the process as a crazy system and called for legal reform. Ellie Gould also campaigned for Ellie's law, advocating that young offenders be treated more like adults when convicted of serious crimes. In 2021, legislation was introduced allowing future teenage killers to receive longer minimum sentences, a move Carol described as a huge cloud lifted from above our heads. Ellie Gould's funeral was held on 29th of May at St. Mary's Church, Calne, attended by family and friends. Ellie Gould was just 17, full of dreams, ambition, and a love for life. She was taken because she wanted to end a relationship, a decision no one could have imagined would cost her everything. But her story does not end with tragedy. Through her family's tireless fight for change, her legacy lives on in campaigns, reforms, and the hearts of those she touched. She was a daughter, a friend, a young woman with a future full of promise. And though she was taken too soon, the memory of Ellie Gould endures, a bright light that no darkness can ever extinguish. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Deadly Diaries. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to stay connected with stories that matter. And remember, if you or someone you know is in danger, please seek help. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and never stop asking why.